Good evening and welcome to Political Forum. It's Wednesday, August 10th, 2016. We're pleased to welcome back as our guest tonight Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. Welcome back, President Preckwinkle.
Thank you for having me.
Political Forum is a live, interactive call-in show that's designed to connect you directly with your elected officials. Over the next 25 minutes or so, we hope you'll have an opportunity to learn more about President Preckwinkle and her views on today's most pressing issues. Your voice and your views are a big part of the program. We don't want to talk at you, we want to talk with you. So we invite your questions for President Preckwinkle. You can join the conversation. Please dial in at 312-738-1060, and we'll try to get to as many calls as possible. President Preckwinkle, welcome back to the program. Welcome back to CAN TV.
Thank you very much
for
having me.
I have to ask, because recently you almost single-handedly broke the internet. You created quite a buzz in Philadelphia at the Democratic National Convention. You were seated next to President Bill Clinton during Michelle Obama's address. What was that experience like, and how did that come about?
Well, I was invited to come to the president's booth over the weekend, right before the convention, and I was pleased to be able to join him. I went up for about an hour, and actually I was a little early and nobody was there, so I went back to the floor with our delegation, and then I went back to thank the president for inviting me, and I had an opportunity to do that, to run down to where he was sitting in the front row. And as I shook his hand and thanked him, Michelle Obama came to the podium to speak, and I thought the optics will be terrible if I get up and leave while she's speaking, so I stayed there and listened to the speech with the president, who was clearly moved that Michelle Obama would say such nice things about Secretary Clinton, and in particular say nice things about the way she behaved when she lost to him in 2008, that she came to the convention, that she pledged her support to him, that she mobilized people and worked hard for his election in 2008, and then accepted his offer to be Secretary of State. So it was very moving, and she also, I think, called the Bernie Sanders supporters to do the same thing, to rally behind the nominee. And without ever mentioning Donald Trump's name, I think was pretty forceful in her depiction of him as somebody unfit for the office.
Now, you were a delegate for Hillary Clinton.
Yes, I was. I was an elected delegate.
And Hillary Clinton has a famous line about shattering the highest glass ceilings, which is something that you know a little bit about as the first woman elected president of the Cook County Board.
Yes, that's true. Bobby Steele, who had been a commissioner, served as president of the board, but she was chosen after John Stroger became ill, and she served out the remainder of his term, and then I was elected to the office in 2010.
And this year on the November ballot, when you think about president, you think about U.S. Senate, state's attorney, we have women running for the highest offices at all levels. Can you say a few words about your views about the state of women in politics today?
Well, it's still true that there aren't as many women who hold political office as you would think. Women are half the population, and we don't hold half of the elective offices. But surely Hillary Clinton's nomination by the Democratic Party to be president is historic. Tammy Duckworth is the Democratic Party's candidate for the Senate in Illinois, and of course Kim Foxx is the Democratic Party's candidate for state's attorney. So we have women in very prominent positions as candidates chosen by the Democratic Party to lead our slate. And you know, I think Illinois is going to be a strong state for Hillary Clinton, and I hope that's helpful to Tammy Duckworth and Kim Foxx as well.
You're watching Political Forum. This is a live, interactive call-in show. Our guest tonight is Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. We invite your questions for President Preckwinkle. You can join the conversation at 312-738-1060. The number at the bottom of your screen, 312-738-1060. Let's talk a little bit about the county. And I understand you're facing a $174 million gap in the FY 2017 budget. Can you talk a little bit about the county budget?
Sure. Well, the first thing is we're coming to the end of our fiscal year 2016 budget, and we are in a position where we have a shortfall of about $48 million. So we've got some challenges between now and November 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year. And then for the budget for 2017, we've got 174.3, something like that, $175 million gap to close. So we have some real challenges, and they're driven mainly by the fact that we have considerable legacy debt that we have to pay. Cook County has half the population of Los Angeles, but twice as much bonded debt, and that's a result of some unfortunate decisions over decades by my predecessors. We also have pension fund obligations that we need to pay, and last year the stock market returns weren't very good, so that's created some pension funding challenges for us. So, and our revenues, frankly, across the board have not met our projections and expectations. So we've got, as I said, challenges till the end of this fiscal year, November 30th, and then challenges going into the next year, despite the fact that over the last 6 years, we've reduced our workforce by more than 9%. We've closed budget gaps of $1.6 billion. We've reduced the tax allocation to our health and hospital system from $400 million in the year that I came in to $121 million now. We've worked hard to make our government more efficient and to streamline, but we still have challenges.
I think a lot of our viewers are familiar with the state budget crisis, which is, despite this stopgap measure, there's still real pain for real people. What impact does the state budget have on the county budget?
Well, as our viewers may know, the state did not pass a budget at the end of its last fiscal year, nor this fiscal year. It only adopted in July a spending plan for 6 months. Now, a budget, in my view, has to have both revenue and expenditures. This was just an expenditure plan, so it wasn't a real budget. It's not a stopgap budget, it's a stopgap spending plan. And as of June 30th, I don't have the numbers yet for July 31st, but as of June 30th, the state owed us a considerable amount of money. I think it's, let me just check here, more than $100 million, $143 million dollars. Most of that to our healthcare system, but the remainder of it to the county as a whole. So the dysfunction in Springfield has been harmful to local units of government all across the state. It's not just Cook County that the state owes money to. It's the city of Chicago. It's the cities, towns, and villages in Cook County. It's units of government all across the state. So this is a real challenging time. We have our own challenges internally in the county, and then we also have the challenges brought upon us by the state's inability to provide a budget.
You're watching Political Forum. This is a live interactive call-in program. Our guest tonight is Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. We invite your questions for President Preckwinkle. Please join the conversation. The number at the bottom of your screen, 312-738-1060. I think we have a caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I've actually two questions. Number one, I heard about some development with the Cook County Hospital building. I just want to know what's the latest there. And also, President, I want to get your take on the temperature at CPS. I know that proposed budgets out there, as well as actually some talks of a potential strike. And I know that being an ex-teacher, that education is near and dear to your heart. So I want to get a gauge on both those issues from you.
Well, let me begin by addressing the education question. I am a teacher by profession. I spent 10 years in the classroom and loved it. But let me just say, I'm clearly I'm not a teacher now, nor do I have any special insight into what's going on in the Chicago Public Schools in terms of finances. This has been a challenging series of years for CPS, and I don't envy the financial position that they're in. I hope that there can be some agreement with the teachers so there's not a strike in the fall, and that we're able to get through the fiscal year without any interruption in the education of our young people. But there's clearly a very challenging situation there, brought upon by long periods of time of not addressing the financial challenges that the school faces, so the school system faces. So that's one thing. On our side, on the campus of the Stroger Hospital, we're building a building to house a new health center to replace Fannis Clinic and to replace our administrative offices. So that'll be to the south and east of Stroger Hospital. That's a project that hopefully will be underway in January, a new health center building. And the second is a longer-term redevelopment project that involves the renovation of the old Cook County Hospital and then the construction of residential office buildings, biotech centers, in subsequent phases. But the first phase is the renovation, hopefully, of the old Cook County Hospital, and that's what our development team is working on now, trying to figure out how much it's going to cost to save the building and what we need to do to preserve it.
I think we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Board President Preckwinkle, about 10 years ago, I was driving a CTA bus, and I picked you up coming out of the Washington library. And I always remember because it surprised us. Whoa! I finally get to meet a dignitary, and but you were alderman then.
Yes.
Not you weren't board president. But my thing is now pensions. Everything goes up here in Illinois, especially Cook County. But the thing is, I live here on the southeast side of Chicago. I do all my shopping over there, and you could go into Indiana for a mile and see nothing but Illinois plates. They do all the shopping, gas. I don't smoke or drink with that. Everything. Nothing here in Chicago is cheap. If it was close, I'd stay here. You know, but it's not even close. 30, 40 cents a gallon cheaper gas. You know, I mean, that's, but I know you came into it. So I know you can't get rid of it in 1 or 2 terms. But the thing is, teachers' pensions, bonds aren't worth nothing anymore. They're junk bonds. But the teachers, you can't fire one, and then they complain about the educational system. If you can't fire the teachers that aren't teaching, what good is having,
Caller.
what good is having somebody like me or you to get rid of them?
Caller.
Bye-bye.
Caller, thank you for your call and your comment and questions. It seems like there were a few things there. I don't know if you want to pick one, but it sounded like pensions. How do we compete with Indiana?
In Cook County, we have 5.3 million people. I think in the state population is 13 million people, so we have a little less than half of the population of the entire state. And we're, frankly, the economic engine for the state. We have 55% of the jobs in northeastern Illinois, which is a sort of 7-county region. And as I said, Cook County is the economic engine, not just for northeastern Illinois, but for the state of Illinois. And it's true that it costs a little bit more to live here than it does in other places in the state, but it's a very attractive place to live. I mean, I love the city and the county, and I'm pleased to be able not only to be here, but to raise my family here. And sometimes living in the city is a little more expensive than living out in rural areas, but I think there are a lot of amenities that go with living in the city that make it a very attractive place for folks. So that's the first thing I'd say. And the level of social services that we have in Illinois is quite different from the level of social services that are supported in Indiana, and that's another reason for the differential. So I'm really pleased to be a City of Chicago resident and a Cook County resident, and I'm willing to pay just a little bit of a premium in order to be able to live in our beautiful city and county, and I hope that's true for others. The problem at CPS, frankly, is the result of long-term inattention to the finances. Frankly, Forrest Claypool inherited a very, very, very difficult situation and struggled, I think, to try to deal with it, and I have a lot of empathy for him. As for teachers in our classrooms, I mean, you have to understand that in the Chicago public schools, we have a very, very large number of young people that come into the schools challenged by poverty, challenged by really difficult neighborhood circumstances. A lot of the neighborhoods that our young people come from are really dysfunctional, and it's not just the violence, it's that in those neighborhoods there are very low levels of educational attainment, high levels of poverty, high levels of unemployment, school closings, really difficult environments for young people. And the teachers who struggle to educate those kids have to deal with kids, as I said, who come from environments where they're plagued by poverty and neighborhood dysfunction. So teachers are challenged by the young people who come before them, and God bless our teachers. They are and have been some of my best friends, and look, nobody goes into teaching for the money. You go into teaching because you love children and you want to share the information, the knowledge that you have with them, and help them along the road. So I'm not prepared to be critical of our teachers. I think the school system financially is challenged, and that makes it very difficult for teachers in the classroom. That's one part of it. The second part of it is the burdens that young people bring with them into the classroom also makes it very difficult for people who are trying to be good teachers.
This is Political Forum, a live interactive call-in program. Our guest tonight is Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. Please join the conversation. Call in at the number at the bottom of your screen. I think we have another caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Hi. Thank you very much for taking my call, President Preckwinkle. I wanted to know from your perspective, it seems as though the mayor of Chicago has really taken a shellacking over the past several months in regards to how he manages the police department and how the police are allowed to engage with citizens. I'm just kind of wanting to know from your perspective if you think that we're being maybe a little bit too hard on the mayor, as well as what you think the city kind of needs to do to mend that relationship and begin to build the trust and move forward.
Well, as I said earlier, we have a number of neighborhoods in our city that are plagued by violence, and that's just part of the dysfunction in those communities, as I said earlier. But clearly we have to address that violence, and we have to address the issue of police-community relations. Now, I've lived in Chicago for 50 years, and I've always believed that police in Chicago can shoot black and brown people with impunity. And unfortunately, I'm not the only one who believes that, and actually the facts bear me out. You may have read in the newspaper, I think it was the Tribune, either earlier this week or last week, about the Independent Police Review Authority, IPRA, where there have been investigations of 702 cases over the last I don't know how many years, and just a handful were determined, these are shootings by police officers of citizens, and only a handful were determined to be unjust. I mean, I can't believe that's possibly the case. And if you look at the Laquan McDonald case, all the officers at the scene, including the shooter, Jason Van Dyke, said that Laquan McDonald was coming at them with a knife. It's only because we have video camera footage of that incident that we know that that's not the case, that he was walking away, and that Jason Van Dyke jumped out of a police vehicle and started shooting at him. And my understanding is none of the other officers who were on the scene, even drew their guns, let alone shot. So, and we only know this, only know the story, we can see what happened because of the video camera, because the reports of all of the officers on the scene, including Jason Van Dyke, were that Laquan McDonald was coming at them with a knife. So not only did Jason Van Dyke not tell the truth, but his story was corroborated by all the other officers on the scene. So here's a bad actor whose bad acts are covered up by his colleagues, and it's only because of video cameras that we know that's the case. Think of how many cases there were previously in which there's no video camera footage, and again, the officers on the scene were untruthful about what actually happened. And then we have the more recent incident of the last 2 weeks in which a young man who apparently stole a car was shot in the back as he fled by the police officers on the scene, who were, thank God, promptly removed from the street and have their police powers taken away from them. But these aren't simply tragic incidents. Although they are tragic, they're an indication of real problems that we have in our police department about interactions with citizens and how folks are treated under very difficult circumstances. Now, clearly need to put more energy into helping police with de-escalation strategies in difficult circumstances, and make it clear that the expectation is not that they shoot first and think afterwards. And I am grateful to Superintendent Johnson for his prompt action in this most recent case of this young man shot in the back by police officers, but it's troubling that these incidents continue to happen, and that in the past anyway, there was little or no consequence when you as a police officer shot and killed somebody. So we've got some real challenges in terms of police-community relations, but we have to figure out how to hold our police officers accountable, or people in the communities will never have any trust in them. And let me just say, I was an alderman for 19 years. I worked closely with the police, and I always say that 95% of our officers are good and decent people who struggle every day to do a difficult job well. 95% of them, and they're the 5% who shouldn't be in uniform. And the problem we've had is that the 5% were not held accountable, and those and the rest of the officers felt it was their obligation to cover up their bad acts. So Superintendent Johnson has a steep hill to climb in terms of trying to restore community trust in the police department.
This is Political Forum, a live interactive call-in program. Our guest tonight is President Preckwinkle, Cook County Board. We invite your questions for President Preckwinkle. Please join us at the number at the bottom of your screen. We have about 5 minutes remaining in the program. Our last caller led with the mayor and then talked about the police. I think you made news recently because of collaboration between the county and the city around growth zones and some work in industrial areas. Can you say a little bit about the growth zones initiative and just collaboration in general between the county and the city of Chicago?
Let me just say, shortly after Mayor Emanuel was elected in 2011, but before he took office, he and I met and we said it makes sense for us to try to work together. We share a building, and there had been virtually no collaboration or cooperation between the city and the county previously. So that was 2011. So after he came into office, we set up a task force to look at potential areas of cooperation and collaboration. And that task force came up with a couple dozen ideas, and we've been working to implement them since. For example, we put together our employment training initiatives. We now have a Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership that does employment training and services to employers for the entire county, instead of having a city entity, a county entity, and then a separate entity in North and Northwest Cook County. So instead of having 3 workforce initiatives within the county, we have 1. And because it's a not-for-profit organization, it can get support from the foundation and corporate community, which it has successfully, in addition to the federal dollars that it gets. So that's one example. We've also worked to combine our printing activities. We've done joint enforcement on cigarette and liquor taxes, for example. So there are a variety of ways in which we're cooperating and collaborating to the benefit of people both of the city and the county. And I hope that we will continue to do that. One of the ways in which we're also collaborating is the growth zones that you mentioned earlier. And this is an initiative to try to identify industrial areas in the city and the county where we can provide incentives, where we can reduce red tape, where we can encourage businesses to locate and provide jobs. And we're hopeful that that will result in new businesses coming to Chicago and Cook County, businesses that are here already expanding, and as a result creating jobs for our city and expanding our tax base.
Another issue that you've been incredibly active on is criminal justice reform, and you've called America's jails the intersection of poverty and racism. Talk about some of your work at the county level around criminal justice reform.
Well, you have to understand that our jails, not just in Cook County but elsewhere, are places where people are detained as they wait for their trials. I think most people think jails are where people serve a sentence, but that's not true, neither in Cook County or across the country. 7% of the people in the jail are serving a sentence. 93% are awaiting trial. So the overwhelming majority are awaiting trial. Of those awaiting trial, 70% are awaiting trial for nonviolent crimes. So our jails in this country are places for pretrial detention. And, if 70% are accused of nonviolent crimes, low-level drug offenses, prostitution and shoplifting, the things people do to get money for their drugs, not paying their child support, not paying their traffic tickets, I think that those folks can await their trials out in the community where they can keep their jobs, continue to go to school, support their families, whatever. It costs us $143 a day to keep somebody in jail, and it seems to me crazy to keep people in jail who are awaiting trial for accused of nonviolent offenses. And we've dramatically reduced the jail population in the last several years from about 10,000 daily average to now about 7,500, so a 25% reduction in the jail population. And I'm grateful to all the actors in the criminal justice arena, especially the chief judge, the public defender, the sheriff, the state's attorney, the clerk of the court, for their good work, their collaborative work in reducing the jail population.
All right, great. We're about out of time. President Preckwinkle, thank you for joining us again on Political Forum. In order for our democracy to thrive, we need an informed and engaged citizenry. So we'd like to thank you for tuning in and for calling in, and we'd like to invite you to join us next week, Wednesday at 7 o'clock for the next edition of Political Forum.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.